cutting the story short of the bumpy ride that continued after that, finally, in 2008, given the continuing activism around the issues of accountability for war crimes, these really gathered momentum, ironically, under the emergency, the state of emergency, when all traditional or all ordinary politics was banned. And as a consequence, one of the few issues on which one could speak out with political actors was around the issue of war crimes. And yet the discourse coalesced around the need now, a much more refined amount, to establish a tribunal and to begin the process of trials. Again, the leading voices in this were cross-party platforms of former freedom fighters, sector commanders, civil society organizations that had campaigned for 40 years, and again, the children of the martyrs. Now, where do we stand now? What has happened between 2008 to 2011? In 2010, Bangladesh government, after a year or so of delay, finally appointed judges, established the tribunal, named prosecutors and investigators. However, it has not yet begun any process of public information or discussion regarding the nature of the proposed proceedings, and despite welcome reiterations that international standards and best practices in the area of international justice will be applied, it is really quite unclear and opaque as to how this will occur, and whether the tribunal and its staff will be given the necessary resources and opportunities to acquire the necessary expertise and understanding of the more complicated international legal procedures that have developed since 1973 to address these issues. Amongst the public, while there's a large groundswell of opinion in favor of accountability, there's also, I think, less clarity on how to deal with the past, what should be done, how it should be done, whether and what kind of social repairs are necessary, whether any kind of healing is possible, whether the tribunal is at all an adequate mechanism for doing that. And above all, I think the questions which are really unasked as well as unanswered about what works and what doesn't work in ensuring justice in a broader sense and sustainable peace. While many have been vocal in calling for trials, and now that we have the tribunal and calling for expeditious process, many also remain deeply concerned about how the tribunal will function in practice, and most critically, about whether adequate and timely measures are being taken to enable it to take on the enormous task that lies ahead. And related to this, I think we have to ask, what will happen following this trial? How will we in Bangladesh move forward as a society? How will anyone who gives witness, who gives evidence before this trial, return to their everyday lives? I think these issues, including how to address the complexity of the violence of 1971 and its diversity, are again questions that are unfortunately remaining unasked in the rush to try and get some kind of resolution. So while the conduct of fair trials by the ICT is an enormous challenge, this moment in history also presents a window of opportunity to engage in some kind of social repair. I think we need to think about how we don't squander this opportunity. How do we ensure that this process meets, if not international gold standards, at least minimum domestic standards of due process? How do we ensure justice for everybody, not just the accused, but the victims? And how will the tribunal overcome the major hurdles faced by survivors in our routine, everyday criminal justice system? The problems of exertion of political influence, of the lack of safety and security, of endemic corruption and abusive process. Will the tribunal look at the experiences of other institutions and learn its lessons? I think these questions and more remain to be answered in the months ahead. As Bangladeshis, there is some hope, and I think we do look forward, that it may, still may, just possibly, enable us to construct a narrative that seeks to understand what forces in society allow such atrocities to happen. And it also might allow survivors of such violence to claim redress, recognition, and respect. For these reasons, I support the critical importance of undertaking and pursuing the exercise and accountability for the crimes committed during the Bangladesh War of Liberation. I believe firmly that atrocities occurred, that they occurred upon a particular majority by a particular group. I don't think there was an equality of arms. I don't think there was an equality of violence, and I think we have to be clear about that. I do think all forms of violence should be addressed, and the tribunal is not currently doing that, but we have to be realistic, and we have to today in Bangladesh without being labelled as somehow a supporter of war criminals, it is essential that we see a credible and legitimate process. The tribunal would be much more effective if it were to engage with the lessons learned by the world, if it were not to turn in on itself, if it were to learn of the developments in jurisprudence without feeling insecure, without feeling nervous about its own potentials to learn and to integrate.